Okay, so we'll continue from where we left off. It was Taruva Siman Kuf Yud Aleph, the last Siman, the last few Seifim, Hey, Vav, and Zayin. We're dealing with different kinds of sfeikas here than the usual. We've seen also difference between a Derabanan and a Deraisa, in that the famous Toilin, or Efshar Loimar, or Sha'ani Oimar, that the Isser went dafka to the Isser and did not affect the heter when we're dealing with more than one pot, and we have a suffix as to where the Isser landed. We introduced that concept of Toilin, or Shani Oimer, assumptions that we make, which is a very interesting idea in itself. However, we did differentiate between an Isser Derabanan and an Isser Deraisa, that by a Derabanan, it would be sufficient, which is, by the way, also Chiddush, that even if you don't have Roiv, because in the end, what we want to make sure is, as the Mechaber says, when do we say Toilin, which is a Chiddush, as long as the heter is Rabba le'Isser. You don't want to have more Isser than heter. That we don't see. Even though there are some that claim that that's also possible. Toilin is a Chiddush, and which allows for that too. We don't hold like that. We hold that 50-50 is fine, which is also good. As long as the heter, is Rabba, as long as the heter is more than the Isur, pretty much the same. But not. Yeah, we're talking about including. Sure. Then we explained that this was only in the Rabbanon. So we basically have two conditions we could say on Toilin. We said that this is concerning an Isur Rabbanon, like Shumna Shel Gid, which is the example of the Mechaber, the fat of the Gid Hanoshe, where we had various scenarios, 3 to be exact. On the other hand, if we're dealing with an Isur Torah and Toilin Hakel, so this is an important point to keep in mind as we go along here, that Isur Torah in itself cannot avail itself, in other words, we cannot avail ourselves of this assumption called Toilin Hakel, unless we're dealing with a Isur Deraisa Shenis Galgele Derabanan. And the easiest way to understand that is Galgele Derabanan is when we're dealing with an Isur Deraisa at one point, but now we're dealing with a shear of the Derabanan. So because of the Taruvas that we're dealing with, we're having an Isur Deraisa being this Galgel rolling down to become an issue in a Derabanan.
And that's called.
Yes.
Even though really these are king halachas.
Yes, even though there are other kinds.
Isser and the is the
exactly, because right now the Isser, or what we are pondering, is a Derabanan question.
If you have Roy.
Exactly.
So as
exactly.
Far as the is concerned,
that's correct. Yeah. And even though when we learned Sveika, we, as the Taz explains, over there it was clear that we won't allow for an Isur Deraisa to come down. In other words, in an Isur Deraisa being this Galgel, it is quite chomer, it is quite strict. In other words, it doesn't change because of that, just because it's nisgalgel. Here it does change. Here we allow it to change. Why? Because it's a big chiddush. In other words, this is a big heter, a big chiddush, which is even greater than Svek in a sense. That we're saying, She'ani Oimer, or that we're toilet, allows us that in the event that we're dealing with an issue, which is a Derabanan, then it's okay, it's acceptable to say that Toilin. In other words, to make that assumption that it went there, it went where it does not cause any trouble. And it's also important that we understand how Toilin works. Toilin works is that the assumption is it went where it does not cause any trouble, where it's not mekalkel. As opposed to, as we're going to soon see, you cannot say that when it can be mekalkel, that which is not mekulkel to begin with. That which is mekulkel to begin with is, as an example, something which is already usher. So we say, what? You know what? Let it go there. It went there. It won't hurt there. Okay? But not if the two are mutter. If the two are mutter, we're going to get into trouble right now. So far, what have we seen?
So I can't be toilet that it fell into the mutter, then I'm not going to.
Exactly, yeah. So there is a difference in a Derabanan or in a Deraisa. Toilin works for the most part on issues that are Derabanan, and if it's a Derabanan, we have additional leniencies that it could be pretty much 50-50. We have to have at least 50-50. Once you have a Deraisa, you could still have some leniency. In other words, we should not be mistaken. It's a little bit, by the way, very, very vague or very unclear. If you go through all the Noisekerim, the Shach and the Taz, as to, oh, you can't say this by the Deraisa. You could still, to a certain extent, apply this Toilin by the Deraisa, but only, as we saw in the Mechaber, in a situation where you at least have Roiv to be Mevatalet. So in the last Sif that we covered, the last two Sifim, Hoyo Isus Shel Torah, if it was a Deraisa, and Toilin Lahakel, to say that it went into the Isser, in other words, unless you have so much heter that it would be nisbatel anyway. In other words, if you would have bitul anyway, then it's not an issue. Then even if the issue is an issue Torah, but you have to have, in this case, you have to have a roiv. We also said, of course, that we could be helped with toilin in situations where it's chaticha ruyulis kabed, dover sheyesh lo matirin, which are real derabbanans, even though they're not batal at all because of their chashibas. Nevertheless, this chidush of toilin allows us even to cancel out or even to do away with the larger bitulim that would be otherwise required in a derabbanan. An additional chiluk that we made was, of course, that we were talking about min b'minoi. However, obviously, if it's a min b'she'eno mino, then shisha would be required, min b'min Torah. And this is going to come up a little bit. We'll see where tam ke'iker, tam is a factor. And that, of course, can bring about other questions like chanan, which we may briefly touch upon also maybe next time we meet. So either way, however you look at it, toiling can still work. However, the conditions may be stricter if it's a deraisa or if it's a min b'she'eno mino. That's all. Okay, what we'll do now is, because the last three seifim are somewhat easy to understand, but require tremendous introductions. In other words, they're easy to understand once you have the introductions. What we may do right now is go through them, because they're easy. I mean, somewhat easy. They're big chidushim. So we, Baruch Hashem, can finish the siman, and then we'll go back and build upon what we've just learned to see how it all fits in and what the makor for each one is. Instead of getting stuck at the makor of every little one and then going to the next one, I thought maybe we'll go through all of them. We have the halachas, we have the various scenarios, and then we can go back and go step by step on how each halacha came about. Because there's various machlokes in here, and it could be a little bit confusing. A lot of taz, a lot of shach, a lot of bach, for a change. Anyway, so Sif Hay is a very interesting Sif. So more or less we're clear on what has happened till now. How you can shtei k'deres shel heter? Sif Hay says, let's say now we're dealing with two k'deres of heter. Oh, okay, fine. Two k'deres of heter. V'lifneihem, and before them you have shtei chatichos acha shel heter v'acha shel isur. Now that's different than what we've seen till now. We have two k'deres of heter. How are you going to say toilet on this one? All right, listen to this. You have two k'deres of heter. We no longer have one k'der of heter, one of isur. You can have the chatichas. Yeah, the chatichas is one isur and one heter. But the k'deres in this case, let's call it scenario number 4 or 5, depending if you include the Pri Megadim scenario. Okay, here we have two k'deres of heter. They're both mutter. And you have two chatichas, one of heter and one of isur. V'noflo achas letoch zeh ve'achat letoch zu. One of the two fell. The two fell. Okay, keep in mind, here we have two nefilas, and that's going to come up, this idea of two nefilas versus one nefilah is going to come up with the Bach. He wants to make a big deal about this. But anyway, we had two nefilas, one of an isra, one of a heter. One fell here, one fell there. What do we do now? What would you say the halacha is? One of them for sure is asa, because each chaticha fell in another gdera. They're both heter. Here there's no toilet. Forget it.
We're not saying that there's a roiv either parts against her.
We don't know yet anything about roiv.
So we don't know all the range.
Oh, as far as the amount versus the chaticha, obviously there's not enough. Yeah, otherwise we wouldn't have a problem.
Saying, is it here of the Rabbanon or the Raisa? That is my question.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. In other words, let's say we want at least a deraisa. Let's say, okay? But we don't have it, obviously. In other words, we have a problem here because we don't have what we require. So you can stick there shel eter felifnim shte chatichos, achas shel het ve'achas shel iser, v'noflu achas letoch zu ve'achas letoch zu. Asur shtehen. They both are also.
The cheaper one?
Cheaper one, yeah. Each one fell into a different one.
No, that we
Right?
know for sure.
That we know for sure. Remember?
It could be, even, we've had the latency.
Right.
So make that argument.
But you asked a very good question, because actually there's a similar point that's brought up by the Isa Veheter, I think. The Isa Veheter, I think, brings up a kasha here, the Rashba. Can we be toila that it fell into the smaller one? Like you said, into the cheaper one. So maybe so since you brought it up, maybe we'll discuss it next time, because this is, there's a lot. There's quite a bit of material here. I'm not sure how much to cover. So thank you very much, actually. That's a good point. Can we sometimes go the cheap way out? Yeah. Yeah. In other words, is there any leniency whatsoever to blame or to be toilet at all? Even though they're both mutter. If we want to be machmer, let's be machmer with the one that's smaller. The smaller one. Let's throw that one away. That's not the big one. Okay. So we'll get to it. Yeah. So it's interesting that, it's an interesting point. But right now, for the Mechaber, we don't see any of that. All we see is that both are aser. Afilu be'isur d'Rabbanon. Of course, im ein b'shum achas kedei levatel ha'isur. As long as, of course, none of them have sufficient to be mevatel the isur. Aval, the good news is, im yesh be'achas mehen, in one of them, levatel ha'isur, shtehen mutaris. Oh. If one of them does have, and that's getting close a little bit to what you're saying, but it's a little bit different. If one of them does have enough to be mevatel the isur on its own, we're going to say, you know what, that's the big one. That is the one that has the koch to be mevatel. We'll assume it fell into the bigger pot. Not because of what you were saying, which is a different idea, but we'll talk about that maybe. Here, only because this enables us to throw the whole thing, in a sense, together and say, Safek d'Rabbanan l'kula. I mean, that's what we're ultimately saying, that this is a form of Safek d'Rabbanan l'kula, this whole idea of toilin. And in the case where one of them is able to be mevatel, we can make that assumption that it went there. But let's go back one step. If the two are heter, and one of them is one chaticha is isur, one chaticha is mutar, we know for sure that each one went to a different pot, so they're both asur. In other words, this is not a case of bitul per se. This is not a case of saying that it went to the worst one, the one that's asur anyway. They're both a mutar. If they're both a mutar, it's as the Meforshim say, my chazis. The term my chazis is used in the Gemara in a different context. If a Jew is asked to kill another Jew, he has to give his life. Who says your blood is redder than his blood? My chazis the damach sumak fei. Right? Have you heard of that term? Who says that your blood is redder than his? You can't kill him just because you want to save your life, right? So, Yaharik ve'al Yavor on Shvichas Damim. Now, here, similar, they want to use the term, my chazis. Who tells you that one should be more asur than the other one? Who tells you that it fell here? Maybe it fell here. What would make one more or worse than the other? They're both starting off in the same status of being heter. You don't have the toilin, the whole logic, or the whole concept of toilin, of blaming the worse one, in this case. You don't have it. And you know for sure it fell. You just don't know where. So you have two pots, right? So you don't have that leniency of saying, well, it fell here. What's the difference between the two? Right? And it's not like you have many pots that are going to be in this battle, right? You only have two. But I'm going to throw you something, a bombshell now, but it's only, in the air. We're going to see at the very, very end a fascinating concept that we haven't seen. Well, actually, let me see. Have we seen anything like it? You may have seen something similar to it in Basar B'Cholov. You could have talked a little bit about it. There's a situation where when you have pots and an isur falls into one of them, and you don't have enough in one pot to be mevatel, you can combine the two pots.
I was going to ask.
I beat you this time. Yeah. Anyway, have you heard something like that? That's fascinating. I mean, that can come in handy. A caterer has two big pots, and it's not enough here, but it's between the two, yes. But why should it be mutter Well, there is something about something that two things that eventually are going to be mixed anyway are as though they're mixed right now.
So that's they're going to be mixed anyway?
Yeah. We're going to talk about it next time, yeah. It relates to Sif Zayin, so I'm going to go through the Sifim, and then we'll talk a little bit more in depth about it.
Mixed.
Yeah, we'll see. There are various shitas on that. What's interesting is there's even a shita that says even if one pot is here, the other one is in the attic. Which, interesting.
And I don't even understand how you're going to forbid the attic. It's nowhere.
Well, you don't know where it fell. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
most likely it didn't fall up to the attic.
No. I mean, you don't know what.
Stairs.
Yeah.
In other words, it didn't fall, but it just disappeared.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, yeah. The dog snatched it and it fell into one of the pots somewhere. I don't know. Yeah. So that's going to be a question, and it's going to be an interesting question because if this concept does exist of tziruf hakderos, that you can combine pots, then the Bach will have a very, very strong question. The Bach will have a question as to why don't we say it here then? Right? Why don't we say here that we're talking that we can combine the Kteros? Why does the Mechaber omit that point? You follow? Yeah. Now you know the relationship between the Bach and the Taz? The Bach is the Taz's father-in-law, or as we call it in Yiddish, his Shver. A lot of stories about those two. Usually there's stories about mother-in-laws. In this case, there's stories about the father-in-law and son-in-law. Anyway, they were both incredible, great leaders of their time. So the Taz speaks about what the Bach has to say here. But this is something to keep in mind because we don't know about this. It's going to be about the Sif Zayin, but they already know what Sif Zayin says, so they already asked it here. I didn't want to confuse you too much, so that's another reason I want to go through all the Seifim first, and then we could see the questions or the sugyas. So far, what do we know from Sif Hey? That if the two are heter, the two kteros, we don't say toilim. No, because you can't say one pot is worse than the other to make any assumptions that it went here more than it went. And since we can't make the assumption, right, and of course neither of them has enough to be mevatel, the iser, so they're both usher. Simply both usher. I can't decide. They're both usher. However, if one of them does have enough to be mevatel the iser, then they're both mutter. Good news, because then I say that the iser fell into the pot that has enough to be mevatel, and memela the other one is mutter too. So they're both mutter. Okay. Sifei. Let's see. Before we go to Seif Vav, let me tell you a little bit of what's going on here in the Gemara. Two sugyas. Gemara in Beya, and this is also a Mishnah in Trumos, about somebody making dried figs, igulet vela, krichos, ktsiois. They used to use a press, a mold, I should say, where they would insert and they would squeeze in order to prepare the figs for consumption, to sell or whatever. And you had barrels, many barrels, and one of them was of truma, the rest were chulin. And this individual came by, and he, on the top of one of the barrels, he started making the dried fig, preparing them. Then he forgot on which barrel was it that he did it. Perhaps he did it on the truma, perhaps he did it on the chulin. In other words, we have here a problem of taruvas of sorts. And there's a machlokes there, Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, I think. That Rabbi Eliezer says something very, very interesting, that you allow for the bottom figs, you say that the bottom figs are mixed with the top figs. Even though they're not really mixed, bottom is bottom, top is top, and all he was doing was crushing or squeezing from the very, very top. If at anything, the top one would be a problem, the bottom one will be a mutter. No, he says no. You can assume that they're all me'urav, assumption again, as though they're all me'urav, and between, as long as you have enough between the various barrels to be mevatel the truma, then you're okay. That's what he says. So he allows for the figs at the bottom to be as though they're combined, me'urav mixed with the top ones, and then everything is me'urav. Everything is mixed. And Rabbi Yeshua says no. Unless you have mea kadin, unless you have 100 separate barrels, you don't mix the bottom with the top. And he's machmir. He says everything is usher. If you don't have the required amount to be mevatalet. In other words, you can't just be mevatalet by taruvas of the barrel in the barrel itself, unless you have all the top, 100 of the top portion of the ktzias, not top and bottom. Top, 100, which means 100 barrels. Then you can see they're all mitzdarf, they're all mitzbatel in 100, 101, like truma is. But you cannot include the bottom with the top. You don't say that the bottom, which is really separated from the top, is mixed, like Rabbi Eliezer says. So the question over here on that Mishnah, the Gemara, is, well, what's going on? We're talking about the Rabbanan over there, and why don't we just say Safek the Rabbanan Lekula? Why shouldn't this be similar to another famous case in Psachim? Gemara brings down a case there were two paths. One path is Tomeh, one path is Tohar. And you had two people walk through the two paths. And now there's a question of what are they going to do now? They realize now that one is Tomeh, one is Tohar. They don't know who is Tomeh, who is, and they may have dealt with Taharas, or they may want to be dealing with Taharas. And it's a big question. It's a real big dilemma. One is Tomeh, one is Tohar. What do you do? So the Gemara says there's something very interesting. If they both come asking separately, they're both Tohar. If they both come asking this question at the same time, they're both Tameh. Right? You understand the difference?
Sure.
Because if they both come at the same time, then obviously it's a contradiction. You can't say Torah to both simultaneously. That is, right? It's like it's a little bit of an inverse of noida. Once you noida, of a niso, of a bitul, of a taruvas, that's it. You already know. Okay, in a sense. So here, by coming at the same time, you already know that one of them is Tameh. You can't say, well, you're Torah. You're both Tmeim. But if each one came separately, you can, because of a suffix. And what's the suffix there? Suffix Tuma B'Reshus HaRabim. It's a cloud in Tuma. Suffix Tuma B'Reshus HaRabim, Sfeiko Tohar. Not B'Reshus HaYachim, B'Reshus HaRabim.
So we recall correctly, as
yeah.
a remote recollection.
Sure.
They had some opinions say you could. So instead of telling both of them you are Torah, that you can't. They bump together. They can walk up to one and say you're Torah.
Yeah, the scenario there is that they both ask the question at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, obviously there could be different scenarios.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. That's how it is. Yeah.
Do you recall?
Maybe maybe it's maybe a little bit different than that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, so based on what we've just learned, based on that machlokes in the Mishnah or the Gemara by Truma, and we see how this is, and we see that for some reason, Rabbi Yeshua was machmir there more than the Shnei Shevilim, where you have even though it's not the exact same suffix, but you also do have a suffix. The Ramban wants to learn that, why by the Chaviyos it was Aser, at least according to Rabbi Yeshua, because the barrels all belong to one person. Or they belong to two people, but they came to ask at the same time. You understand? Was based on that. He wants to say over there, even because it should be a suffix d'Rabbanan. Why should we treat it as a suffix d'Rabbanan? So based on that other Gemarim Psachim of Shnei Shvilim, will we differentiate between coming at the same time? There are two people there, or not coming at the same time. He wants to say that, in our other case of the tziyos, of the figs, where there's a mixture, possibly a mixture or not, where we have a suffix, there we say, according to Rabbi Yeshua, that it's also only because either it belongs to one owner, or it's two owners, but they ask at the same time. So what I infer from that if in fact it does belong to two people, and it would come to ask at different times, that perhaps I would say over there too, even according to Rabbi Yeshua, that it would be mutar. That's what the Ramban wants to say. And the Rashba says, no way. He says, She'ani Oimer, these assumptions, cannot help me in cases of taruvas, of where there's a need for bittul, which we have in the Mishnah. Wherever there's a need for bittul, I cannot make any assumptions. I cannot therefore, use, or he will not use the leniency of the Ramban. He will not compare it to what the Ramban compares. He says over there, it would not make a difference at all if it was one individual, or if it was two individuals at the same time or not at the same time. These little details, according to the Rashba, would not make a difference whatsoever. And he says the whole toilin, the whole leniency of toilin, or sha'ani oimer, only applies when one of them is for sure asur. Okay, like the cases the various scenarios that we had over here.
There was certainly also there too.
Well, yeah, but that's a different halacha in Tumah. Yeah, you're right. That's a different halacha in Tumah. But the Rashba wants to say that in the case of one bailim or two bailim at the same time or not the same time, they will both be asur either way. In other words, we would not be helped in that case because you don't have the leniency that we have that by toilin, that you have one of them being for sure asur. Okay? So we make that assumption that it went to that which is for sure asur. But when you have a question, when you have an issue dealing with taruvas, like the case of the Mishnah, we don't apply that. That's what the Rashba said. Anyway, I gave you this only so that you should be able to follow what we will soon see is the Mechaber and the Ramah, the Shach and the Taz, and how they learn, and each one takes different sides. One learns more like the Ramban, one learns more like the Rashba. So we see that the Rashba would not agree with the Ramban. A very important machlokes is therefore between the Ramban and the Rashba on whether you can apply this everywhere or not. Because if we can apply it by two bailim, then perhaps that would explain our Seif Hey of why we don't combine them, like in Seif Zayin. In Seif Zayin we will learn that you can sometimes combine two pots to have the roiv. But the Taz, as we will see, says, no, we don't see that there's such a difference, that it will make a difference on one owner or two owners. Then there's another possibility, the Bach's own proposition, that you know what? In Seif Hey, you have two reusos, two problems, versus Seif Zayin. In Seif Hey, you have two falls, two nefilas, the Isser falling and the Heter falling, both pots being affected. It says when you have two nefilas, it's two reusas, two problems, you cannot say tziruf. But even that, the Taz I think says, we don't see that it makes such a difference. We never saw that. Nobody ever told us that that should be a difference, that if you have one versus two nefilas, whether you can combine pots or not. So anyway, the one that makes the most sense, however, is the third proposition that the Taz gives on this question, as to the difference between Hay and Zayin, the Gabi, can you combine pots? The third one makes the most sense, and that is, you know what? We simply in Seif Hay don't have enough between two pots. That's why the Mechaber doesn't mention, just combine them. The fact that he doesn't mention it, you could also say he only speaks about it then, when he gets to it. It's a different halacha. Yeah, that could be true. But this is the third possibility that they want to say, is that perhaps in Seif Hay we don't have enough. If you did have enough between the two pots, you could be mevatel, you could be metzaref, and make the bid. But maybe, hey, we don't have it, and in Zayin we do have. Okay. Yeah. But important chiluk we saw so far is the chiluk between Ramban and the Rashba. In other words, can we apply toilin in other places too? Yeah. So here in Seif Hay, we can't really apply toilin, either way you look at it, because they're both moheter. If they're both heter, you may want to get away with it and say, well, what if you had two owners, right? But that, again, not everybody would agree to that. So, but if you have one that's more mekulkal, one that is already an issue in itself, it's answer, then I can apply toilin. That's the classical case. But to apply toilin and to make assumptions in other areas, no. That's what the Rashba says. Okay, see Vov. What if you have as follows? Okay, we have two kderos of heter, same like Seif Hay. The two are heter. The nafal isur l'toch, and an isur fell into one of them. And you know what? This time around, I actually know where it fell. V'yodua le'eze nafal. I know where it fell. Oh, good. Guess what happened next? Now this one is really interesting. You follow so far? You have two heter, and you have an isur that fell into one of them, and I know which one it fell into. 25 minutes later, another isur, v'choza v'nofal isur l'toch achas mehem. Later on, another isur fell in, the second time around, but this time I don't know where it fell. Ve'en yadua le'eze nofal. Ani oimer, look at this, again, ani oimer, I make this assumption, le'mokom isur harishon nofal. You know where it fell? Chances are, it fell into where the first one fell.
It's the same piece, actually, right?
No.
What, a second piece?
A second piece, a second treif hot dog, whatever. Interesting, isn't this? Wow. Chiddush. The first one, I know where it fell in, the first one. Good for you. Now, and this fell again. I don't know where. Because we make it such it fell into the same bad
How is
place.
this a different case from our... Once the Isser fell into one of them, and I know which one, that pot became Asr. So now I have an Isser pot, I have a pot, and another Isser fell. How in case?
Wow. This is a great kasha. Did you hear your last kasha?
Yeah.
You're wide awake.
Okay. I apologize.
No,
No, but I'm missing something.
no, that's a good question. You're not the first one to ask it.
I make no originality.
Yeah. Everybody, there's quite a few that ask this question. And that we'll talk about in Mr. Sherman on Thursday. That's one of those, that's one of the details that we'll talk about.
For
But
sure, I'll be back.
But you understand the question. The question is, wait a minute. Okay, so what do we see? It fell into the first one. I know where it fell in, the Isur. Now another Isur falls in, and I don't know where. I make the assumption it fell into the same one. Well, this is very similar to what we've learned in the past, that I have an Isur Kedera. Because that's what this is. The Isur Kedera is where the Isur fell into the first Kedera. It's just like an Isur Kedera. And I say, you know what? It fell into the Isur Kedera, not to the Het Kedera. Even though here I have two Heter Kederas to begin with, but 25 minutes earlier it had become an Isur Kedera. So I'm saying the same thing I said before. I make the assumption it fell into the Isur Kedera. Is there a Chiddush over here? Is there anything different? I mean, it does at first appear to be very interesting. You know what? Where the first time it fell, the second one fell too. So that in itself is a little bit different. But if you look deep down, in halachic-wise, or logic-wise maybe, it is the same or similar to the first halacha in the very beginning
No,
that
at
we
least
read.
it requires an explanation why it would be different.
Or what's the real chiddush?
What's the chiddush?
What's the real chiddush? Right. So we'll talk about that too. ואין ידוע לאיזה נופל, אני אומר למקום איסור הראשון נופל. גם השני. Okay, so far so good. אבל אם נופל איסור לתוך אחס מהן. Let's say something different. If an isur fell in to one of them. ואין ידוע לאיזה נופל, and I don't know to which one it fell.
Now both of them are Asr, according to what we just saw.
Right. Right? אם נופל איסור לתוך אחס מהן, as long as they don't have roib, right?
Right.
אבל אם נופל איסור לתוך אחס מהן, ואין ידוע לאיזה נופל, okay. And 25 minutes later, אחר כך נופל איסור לתוך אחס מהן, וידוע לאיזה נופל,
That's the case.
the reverse case, right? שתיהן אסורות. They're both asur.
Now that's even a bigger fish.
Yes. In a sense, well, yeah, somewhat, yeah. Okay, so the second case of this Sivav is the reverse, where the first time around, I don't know where it fell. So I have a problem.
But you do know where the second is.
I do know the second, 25 minutes later, I do see the Isra falling in. Oh, it fell here.
So what he's saying is, you don't say, the first Isser probably also fell into the same.
Right.
You don't do a reverse.
You don't undo the chazaka of the first one. And the first time around, in a sense, you had a chazaka. They're both asr. Don't tell me now that the second isr is going to undo an isr. I'm already giving you a little bit of an explanation on the second scenario more than on the first one. The second one, in some ways, is a little. That's the Beis Yosef. I think that's the Beis Yosef that gives this explanation, but I don't remember everything by heart. Beis Yosef says you don't undo the chazaka because you start off with the chazaka. They're both asr. You have two. There's no roiv, right?
So it's otherwise you would have the paradox that the Isser falling into one of two Asr parts makes the other one
Motor, yeah, exactly. That you don't say. So in some ways, it's understood. In some ways, it's a chiddush, but it's not a chiddush. So the Ramo adds to this, the dafka she'ein shishim levatel ha'isur. Obviously, he's talking when you need shishim. Dafka she'ein shishim levatel ha'isur shenofar sham. Aval im hoyo shishim levatel ha'isur shenofar sham the second time around, have a ki'ilu lo nofar sham isu klal.
Right. So you still have, but wait a second, but you have two Asr parts right now in front of you. What good does it do you they have Seishim when it's an Asr part? The first Isser, you have to have 60 on the first Isser.
Sure. Yeah. All he adds, I mean, is that it's obvious to us that אבל אם היו שישים לבטל האיסור שנופל שם וכאילו לא נופל שם איסור כלל, there's no problem, right? The first time around, I don't know where it fell.
So you have B'tziruf 60.
No, so we're not even talking about Sirif. That's the next thief. So far, we don't know anything about Sirif.
So we don't know where it fell. So I have to have in both parts 60 individually.
Why? Remember, what did we say?
I don't know where it fell.
Yeah, but what did we say before? אם אין בשום אחס כדי לבטל האיסור, אבל אם יש באחס מהן לבטל האיסור, שתיהם מותרות. Okay, that was in Sif Hey. Now, but that Sif Hey, that Sif was a little bit different. In that Sif Hey, you have Shtei Chatichas, one of Heter and one of Isser. Right? So you said if you had in one of them to be mevatel the Isser, Shtein Mutoris. That's because the other one is completely Heter. But the Ramo, in the Ramo saying that Dafka she'en shishim levatel ha'isur shenofal sham, aval im hoyo shishim levatel ha'isur shenofal sham have kilu lo nofal sham isur klal. So which one is he talking about here?
Well, he quotes the Beker Shtef Hashem Arash.
Yeah.
Now when he says Shenafal Sham,
Right.
what is Sham sounds? It's a particular part. Sham sounds like you know where it's at.
Yeah. Let's see here. ודווקא שאין שישים לבטל האיסור שנופל שם. What I understood right now is that the Ramo is talking about the last segment here. In the last segment we said that the second time around, that will be
the Sham.
Right. So shtehen asuros. We want to say that they're both asur. That's we understand. V'davka she'en shishim levatel ha'isur shenofal sham, where I know it fell. Aval im hoyo shishim levatel ha'isur, where it fell shenofal sham have kilu lo nofal sham isur klal. So that one that has the shishim is not, doesn't have a problem.
Why not?
Because it has shishim. Because that one has shishim.
But they're already both asur from the first.
But that one has shishim.
But from the first four, they were.
Makes no difference. That one has shishim.
It's a pot that has an isur in it.
It's a pot that has shishim connected to isur.
No, but not the first isur.
Makes no difference. Even if it's the first isur, both of them can be there. It has shishim.
Because we just said the sham is the case where we know which.
Remember what we want to say over here is we want to say they're both asur. So it comes along the Ramon and says, you know what? They're not necessarily going to be both asur. That pot has shishim, the second pot, or the first pot. The pot that has shishim is not going to be asur. Even though I'm telling you they're both asur, because of what we said earlier, that we're not removing the chazaka of the first time around the isur.
Right.
But if a pot has shishim, that a pot that has shishim is not going to be asur. The isur will affect the one that doesn't have shishim because of the suffix.
So, but that should have been already true the first time around. So you should have never said that both pots are asur.
He only says both pots are asur towards the end, right?
No.
Because he said in the beginning, Aval im nafal, in the first case, he knows where it fell. So in the second case, where it falls...
Is it the second one is right? Is the rice
No.
bottle?
Yeah.
That one, the first one was bottle.
In your body is enough.
What is that?
One.
Right.
It fell. It was mavatal and it even, so now it's much. second one fell, maybe now it's only this stuff. Otherwise, it was
No, well, well, obviously, what no, he's saying here is no, you can't make a reverse assumption. In other words, it fell the first time around, right? I believe, in other words, you have heter, okay? You had heter to begin. First time around, we know where it fell. Great. Second time around, we don't know, so we say it fell where the first one fell. So that one is affected, this one is not affected. Okay. If it's the reverse, where the first time around, you don't know where it fell, and as a result of that, you have a problem here of Isser, and then the second time around, it fell again. And this time, you do know where it fell. Don't tell me that just because I know the second time it fell here, that it will make that one mutter all of a sudden. Why? Because that one has become Asr, it stays Asr. For the first time around that I don't know. And I can't make an assumption because they're both heter, remember?
Why are we saying for the second part where I know where the Isser fell, there's an Isser in there?
Yes.
The first part, which I don't know where the fell is,
Has become Asr.
is Asr because there might be an that fell.
That's right.
So that's what
An additional Isser, because the two pieces of Isser fell, right.
ultimately
Ultimately, two pieces of...
Now it could be the first piece fell into the same part where the second piece fell.
It could be.
But I'm not going to permit the other part because of that possibility.
Right.
Because it could just as well be that it fell into that one.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So now he comes...
So now comes along the Ramon and says, "V'davka shein shishim levatel ha'isur shenofal shom." Aval im hoyo shishim levatel ha'isur shenofal shom, then have ki'ilu lo nofal shom isur klal. That particular pot, and it could really be any pot. If there's shishim in that pot is out of the question. That's what it
seems like he's saying.
It seems like he's saying. On the other hand, we'll have to figure out, tzarechim, a little bit, as to why there should be, what's the difference exactly between this Ramah and what we learned at the end of Sif Hey, that avalim yesh be'achas mehen levatal ha'isur, if one of the pots has sufficient to be levatal the isur, steihem mutaros, then the two are mutar. Other than, of course, that scenario, that case is one is a piece of heter falling in and one is a piece of isur falling in. Here we're only having isur falling in.
We have two Isra.
Two isurim falling in. Yeah, other than that. That's why I agree that the Ramah is not very, very clear, and we'll have to leave it for next time too. But
now he says in the name of the Beit Yosef, the Beit Yosef in the name of the Rashba, no? That's what he says?
Right.
So one has to look it up in the Beit Yosef?
We'll double check it inside. Yeah. All right. Sif Zayin, which is the last Sif of Hilchos Aruvos. Hoyu kan shteik deros, there were two pots, shel heter. Okay, so once again we're talking about two pots of heter in all three seifim. V'nofal isur l'tech mehen, and then isur fell into one of them. Ve'en yadu ala isur nofal, and we don't know to which one it fell. All right, sounds familiar. Ve'en be'achas kedei levatel isur, neither one has enough to be mevatel the isur. Okay, but v'yesh b'shteihen, between the two of them, kedei levatel. Between the two of them, they do have enough to be mevatel the isur. Shteihen mitztarfois levatloi, the two combined to be mevatel it. Oh, really? Then why did you say it in Sif Hey? That's the question they had. Apparently, it's a separate idea. It's a big chiddush. What we're saying is heter. We're talking about heter right now. We're talking about an isur falling in, which, by the way, this Seif is a little bit different than Seif Hey in the sense that here we only have an Isser falling in. We don't have an Isser and Heter falling in. In Hey we had Shtei Chatichas, Achashel Heter, Achashel Isser. And we still said that they're both Asuras because they're both Heter. The two parts are Heter. You can't say one is worse than the other. Here you have a little bit of a different case. You have one piece of Isser falling in. You don't know where. It's true that there's not enough to be Mevatel, which ordinarily would make it them both also just like before. And before you even had a piece of heter along with it. You know, it was in some ways it was better, even though the Bach says it's worse. In some ways that case was better because you had a heter and an isser. Here you have only an isser. All right. But you don't have enough to be mevatelet, but between the two you do have. So mitztarfas levatloi, they can combine to mevatelet. The lo'oid, not only that, one is in the house, in the living room, in the kitchen, whatever, and one is in the second story. With starfos, they can combine. But what din afilu leme'ah? It doesn't have to be 2, it could be 100. They can combine. Bameh dvarim amurim, when was all this said? Now comes the punchline. When is all this applicable, and when does all this work out? B'sheshteihem, when the 2 pots, shel odom echad. Sounds familiar? When they all belong to one individual, one balabos. B'fishikol shehen shel odom echad, we say, a famous rule, that as long as they all belong to one balabos, one owner, we say that osid lis arev, that the pots will eventually mix. Shabbos leftovers will be mixed with Sunday's dinner. Just leave it to your wife; she'll do it. Yeah. Eventually, the pots, if it's one owner, eventually they'll mix somehow. Avar imem sheshnei bnei odom, if they belong to 2 individuals, ein mitzdarfois. Oh, so he's already taking sides here, the Machaber. If they belong to 2 bnei odom, they don't combine. So it comes along the Ramah and says, "V'yesh machmirim afilu be'odom echad ein lehakel," that we should not be lenient on this revolutionary concept of tziruf gederas, even if it belongs to one individual to be makel, but l'tzorech hefsed, there's a big loss. Yesh lehatir be'odom echad, one individual. Mihu, however, ein leochloi elo le'achar sheyarveno yachad. But don't eat them until you have actually mixed them.
I was going to tell you, because with your example, what does it do to help you on Shabbos that tomorrow is going to mix?
Yeah. You would go ahead and mix them. Even though ordinarily we don't mix to be mevater isur lechatchila, here we already make the assumption that it's osid lis arev, that allows you to be me'arev it.
Assumes that you could.
Yes. No, that allows you, not assumes.
No.
It assumes that you will mix it, not that you could.
You could have 2 pots.
Right.
Here in those stairs.
Right.
And what fell in, whatever reason it is, and what is not making washing, they would
Right.
not be there.
Right.
It wouldn't
Well,
be
obviously, yeah, that wouldn't apply.
there. So it has to be
That's mixable. That's a good point. Yeah, it has to be something that is mixable. Yeah, I think somebody speaks about that. It would have to be something that is possible to mix.
How could we assume that?
Yes, good. That's good. Yeah. So the Tzorech, the Ramah says the Tzorech hefsed.
Behind the log.
And Shach explains, I think it's hefsed meruba only. What?
And what's the key?
Can you break the log?
Yeah, no, he's saying how could they mix? Yeah.
Can you break the log?
It didn't say wait a
Yeah.
It's just that ultimately.
But he says you should not eat them ela le'achar sheyarveno yachad, until you've mixed them both together. The ask var nisbatel isur, then the nela, the isur has become nisbatel.
That means you can intend to mix.
In this case, yeah.
But you were planning, but it was going to get mixed anyway, so you're not mixing it for the purpose of being the
We
bottle.
had earlier that we would not.
But that
In
was
this case-
So
this is an exception to that.
no, but we had also before that, I think it was the Taz who said, let's say for instance, if you have bees in honey, and you're going to heat up the honey anyway, even though that's going to destroy the bees as a barrier,
Yeah.
and thereby making the honey mutter, this is not called being mevatel isur lahatchila, because you're heating up the honey because of that's how you process honey, and not in order to be mevatel the isur. So if the intention is not to be mevatel the isur, but mevatling the isur is a side effect of something that you were going to do anyway, you don't call that being mevatel the isur hatchila according to that Taz. And here seems to
Anyway, I find it interesting that the Taz disagrees with the Ramah. Says you don't have to mix them. Yeah, you won't have to mix them. The Taz is choilek and paskins that even if they were not mixed since min Torah, they're mutter or through bitul beroiv. Only merabbanan you need.
so that
And
was
since you're kivin, there's a suffix here as to where it fell. Both are become part of the same suffix. They both are mitzvah to be mevatel, and each one is mutter b'fnei atzmoi. Since they are going to be combined anyway, they are as though they're combined right now. So since they will be, they are combined as of now. In other words, you don't really have to go ahead and combine them. Interesting. He said that's the chiddush over here. Because midaraisa.
But the Taz apparently is this a Durabana. Would you say that?
What? No, at this point. In other words, that
apparently
you
Taz's understanding is if it was an Issa Deraisa, this would apply possibly. So it
that
has to be
we will see that. That's another area that we need to discuss as if this applies to pure deraisis too, or just like we just said now, in a situation where with deraisa it's already bottle, and the only question is in a derabanan. That's a question in itself. In other words, they discussed that if everything towards the end are only, some say it's only Isur D'Rabbanan that we're talking about towards the last few seifim. But anyway, what's interesting is that the last words of this siman is Vanisbatel ha'isur. So Hilchas Aruvas ends with Bitul of an Isur, and in Mitzvah Hashem, we're holding very, 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 very close to Mashiach, where all the Isurim, all the Yitzhahara, all the problems with Zrat Hashem will be Nisbatel very soon. All right, and Mitzvah Hashem will review these last halachas, seifim, with the Noisei Kelim Mitzvah Hashem on Thursday.
Good.